How you doing? Welcome back to Taekwondo Bro. Today we have another fight review. It's going to be kickboxing versus Taekwondo. And this is a subscriber suggestion. So shout out to Armando Ramos 2887. He's been active before in the comments. And I'm always happy to hear from subscribers some interesting stuff. Now in regards to this fight, all I can tell you is that it was filmed before 1995. And maybe Armando knows something else about this fight, so you can comment it down below. But right now we have an exhibition fight, continuous sparring between Taekwondo and kickboxing. This video series, because this video is a little long for one piece, it's going to be broken up into each individual fight because there's multiple fighters who are going to come up here. So we're starting off with these two right now. And as we can see, it's pretty explosive right off the bat. Taekwondo fighter has a little bit of a size advantage, and kickboxer, it looks like he has a bit of an advantage in terms of muscles. Look at those arms there. Huge. So, anyways, look at that sweep. That's a great one. By the way, as we usually do with these fights, we're going to go through it live for one round, and then I'm going to use slow motion to capture some of the significant moments throughout the fight. So, we're just going to let it roll right now. And just an interesting observation, the gloves they're using are not the same. So the Taekwondo fighter has that classic headgear and those Taekwondo gloves. So they have like an open mitt, and your fingers are kind of like in it, almost like a large oven mitt. And the boxing gloves, the thumbs are together. So there's probably a bit of a weight difference between those two gloves. And this is the type of thing you would see back in the day, before UFC came and kind of standardized a lot of the gear. Axe kick right over there. And yeah, back in the day, you'd see these weird fights like this. Guys with one boxing glove, one hand, different types of foot gear. So what I've gathered from the original commentary from these fights is that it's an exhibition, so they don't want knockouts. But we're going to go through a couple of these fights, and it does look like they go pretty hard. I'm not saying they're headhunting per se, but they definitely aren't holding back too much. So let's go back here. There's a little bit of slow motion already in this fight. So that right hand over the top, that was caused by the Taekwondo fighter's guard. He has like a little bit of a low guard, which is usually a strategy in Taekwondo, but you got to adapt sometimes when it comes over the top. So it clipped him. And this Taekwondo fighter, he's not afraid to throw hands, as you can see. So he'll throw kicks from the outside, and he'll just follow in with a lot of power. And the kickboxer, since he has a little bit of a range disadvantage, is kind of forced to close in. Now, as we saw there, it was kind of getting a little sloppy, and he, I guess, tripped. Didn't look like a sweep per se, but more like they just got tangled up. So they're back at it again. And it was another heavy hit for both of them coming in. It was a spinning back fist there, which is always cool to see. Look at that instant kick, feinting. So Taekwondo fighters like to switch their stance a lot, which is not something that's common in most martial arts. So you'll see him switch from left foot forward to right foot forward. And this is usually done to mess with the timing, because Taekwondo fighters usually kick pretty proficiently with both legs. You're not going to see kickboxers do it as much. I'm not saying they won't do it, because as you see right now, he just did it there when he backed up to counter. But it's not as emphasized. So as we see, another side kick coming in, following up. And instead of going back to the guard, he swapped foot when he pulled his foot back in. So that jab really didn't go anywhere. So they both kind of came in, both made contact with their jabs, but the Taekwondo fighter was in that reverse stance, assuming he's a righty. And look at that. That was an amazing sweep right there. We used to call that the dragon sweep. So it's like a turning hook kick almost, but you're doing it to their legs. Now, you need amazing timing to make that work. So that's definitely going to be a highlight reel, and we will be looking at that in slow motion, by the way. So following up with a powerful round kick, not necessarily pulled back. And we saw a little bit of a dash straight punch, which is pretty common in karate and taekwondo. Now, it's getting pretty, messy over here as we see punches flying left and right. Broken up, making sure that helmet is on straight, which is something that is a little interesting about this fight, because the helmet is only on one fighter. So not only are the gloves not standard, but the entire dynamics of the helmet are something that needs to be looked at, especially when it comes to getting clinched like that, because the helmet can kind of like turn sideways, blind you. If it's not on tight enough, sometimes it can get loose from impacts. So that's something that's not standardized, but I don't think it makes too much of a difference. So we made it through the first round. Let's look at a couple slow motions here. So that axe kick over the top did not land. It was captured and used for that amazing takedown there. So that's always a risk of throwing an axe kick, that it can get stuffed. And if the guy that you threw it at knows what he's doing, you will end up on the ground. So that was pretty cool to see. Now just look at the difference between the footwork between these two fighters. So that was another leg kick, but that didn't have the timing of the last one, so, didn't really produce as much there. Slowing it down real quick. A couple punches going left and right. So that's a really, it's a bit of a furball there between these two. Those are some strong hits to the body. That right from the kickboxer didn't quite land. So now we're back at it in regular speed. Alright, so prepare yourselves because we have another big sweep coming up. So I want you to take a look and see if you can kind of predict when it's going to happen based on the footwork. I think that switching from orthodox to southpaw stance by a Taekwondo fighter is messing with the kickboxer a little bit. Obviously, it's hard to tell exactly what's going through their heads. Alright, we got another sweep coming up now. And that was not quite as clean as the last one, but that was pretty well timed. And the fight has been broken up on the ground, so obviously there's no grappling in this fight. But when you have a very kind of closed off sideways stance like that, which is what the Taekwondo fighter was doing, you run the risk of getting kicked in the back of the legs because you have like a more clean shot to the rear, and from that angle you're just going to have your legs taken out from under you. Slow motion again, solid right over the top. Countered with a body kick there, and we're just seeing a little more of this back and forth again. Moving in and out. That was a strong hit there. Over the top, didn't quite land. Kickboxer, good hit. The Taekwondo guy doesn't stop. And back to round kicks. So we're moving regular speed again. Look at how kind of upright the Taekwondo fighter stance is compared to the kickboxer. His feet are sometimes very close together, sometimes they spread out. Axe kick. Now that was over the top, and what he did right there, kind of grabbing at the kickboxer's head, was preventing what happened last time. So although that wasn't the cleanest impact, it still went over the top, hit him in the back, and he prevented a takedown there. So, in and out, closing in, hitting both of themselves. Fight is broken up, and look at that. So they're going to take a seat, going between rounds. So I cut out the previous editing from before, so we're just going on to the fight where it goes next. So just slow motion here, you can see the exchange of punches again. Kickboxer trying to close in, but he's getting hit all the way in. So you got to keep their heads down sometimes, keep on throwing. There was almost another sweep there because the kick was captured. And again, it looked like there was an attempt there at another sweep, but it kind of closed into a punch. So this kickboxer likes to sweep this guy, and as this fight is going on, I think he's getting a little more confident in the timing. So that's why you got to mess your timing up sometimes. Okay, strong hit. Look at that. So that low guard, sometimes if you don't bring it back up in time, you're going to get hit in the face like that. Pretty good. So kick in, it doesn't quite go. Turning back fist does make contact, so that's pretty cool. Now, in striking, there's really not much to worry about with that, but in grappling, you do need to be careful to not have your back taken so you get choked out. But that was a good counter. I don't think he was expecting it, so clean hit with the back fist. We're slowing it down again. So that was another back fist coming over the top, and it looks like the counter punch didn't quite land from the kickboxer. So something that you don't see a lot in boxing is that front hand back fist. They just have the jab, so it's a different angle, comes in more from the side, and it's pretty quick, so you got to be careful with it. And we're back at a little war here between the two of these guys. Look at that little VHS magic there we're seeing. So it's going to get a little bit intense over here coming up because we're almost approaching the end of the fight. Slowing it down. Look at that footwork. Chambering in for that big side kick. And it was anticipated, and look at that amazing sweep there. Check that out. That's kind of crazy. Now, it wasn't capitalized quite as good as the other ones. They just both end up on the ground, but that was pretty nice to see. And it's always something you got to be careful about. If you throw that huge, powerful kick, sometimes you will be countered pretty hard. So they're going to start him back up on their feet again. He was raising his hand. They're trying to bait him, throwing that round kick, switching feet into then what becomes a jab. So that's an interesting combo. It's a good way to close distance. Now, look at this over here. This is pretty cool. back and forth, right up against the camera, and they're broken up. Alright, we are almost at the end of the video for today, so if you have any other interesting fights you want to have on this channel, just drop a link in the comment below and I will check them out. Look at this over here, right over the top. So that instant side kick was beaten by that counter straight punch from the right side. Another axe kick was thrown, but he backed up into a switch foot into a jab. Now they're both on the ground. Alright, they're going to be stood back up. And that looks like that is it for this fight. So once again, shout out to Armando for sending that clip in. That's pretty cool. Check out his playlists on his YouTube. He has some pretty interesting compilations of fights. And if you have any other interesting things you want me to cover on the channel, just leave them in the comment. I'm going to get to it eventually, and I will comment back just to tell you that I'm on it. There's always some interesting stuff out there, and it's hard to find it, so I do appreciate the crowdsourcing of the intel here. Like I said, this fight was from 1995 or earlier. And that's always my favorite era to cover fights, because you have this bizarre pre-MMA style versus style trend that was going on. And some of that stuff, it's just very interesting to see fighters who have no idea what to expect coming up with a new style. So like, subscribe, and leave any comments. Let me know what you think of the fight. Maybe bring up some of the moments yourself with your own analysis. We're always happy to see it. Take care, and I will see you guys next time.